Here on Daesak TV, the creator of goodness. My name is Peter Kamau, and today, being on Wednesday, 14th of December, that is 2022, I hope that you are very fine. And remember that you can just follow us on our social media handles. That is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Daesak TV. And remember also, you can just send us text message on the number running below your screen. And today we have a lot right up for you, and some of things that we have today for you. It is all about the newspaper, what is making the stories which are in the newspaper, what has been going on in the current affairs, things which are happening in our country right now. As we all know that the president William Ruto is in he has attended the summit, very summit in America, whereby it is an African US summit, which has brought the leaders from Africa together with the leaders from America. But before then, let's look at what is in the newspaper today and what is making the headlines today. And on the Daily Nation, we find that Uhuru to leave Jubilee Azimio. This is the former president Uhuru Kenyatta who will be leaving Jubilee as a party leader, and also azimiolaumoja as a leader, as a chairman of the coalition that we shall be looking at that story right alone. But in the story which is making headline in the Standard newspaper today, it is all about Ruto looks west to fulfill hustler dream. It is all about President William Ruto on what he is looking up to, all the countries that he is looking up to for him to ensure that he fulfills his dreams and the promises that he made to the Kenyans. Now let us look at what is in the Daily Nation right now. And as I have told you that the story that is making headline today, it is all about Uhuru to leave Jubilee Azimio. And you find that a retired leader has been busy with the DR Congo, Ethiopia peace efforts. And you find that there is a question that has been asked here, that is it an end of an era? Is it an end of an era? Former President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to resign as the chairman of Azimio Laumoja One Kenya Coalition Council and leader of Jubilee Party to focus on the peace initiatives he is spearheading in the region. Is Kenya's former head of state hanging up with his political boots? It is a question that have been asked there, and we shall find the answers on page 6 of the Daily Nation. And as we move on another story, we find that today it is a great day for Africans, whereby Morocco will be facing France today on a semi-finals. We find that Morocco carry Africa's hope in today's semi-final. Morocco players take part in a training session at the Al SA Stadium in Doha yesterday on the eve of the Qatar 2022 World Cup football semi-final match against France. The story shall find it on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. And remember that when we talk about Morocco, is the only African team remaining in the World Cup, participating in World Cup, whereby it will meet with this country called the team from France. And if they'll be able to beat France, they'll qualify for finals. But now, this is after Croatia yesterday walitengenezwa tatu bila na timu kutoka kule Argentina. Now, as we move on to other stories, we find that tribunal to hear secret of IBC4. It is a story that we shall find on page 4 of the Daily Nation, whereby the 4 besieged electoral commissioners are booked into a high-end furnished apartment after the explosive press conference on August 15, where they disowned the presidential election results, and over the next 5 days met a high-profile Azimio Laumoja One Kenya Coalition raiders. Evidence before a tribunal investigating their conduct has shown. Yeah, it is a story whereby it is all about the 4 IBC commissioners who disowned the presidential results in during the August 2022 election, and so they are still facing the tribunal. And we have there is a story here about how they secretly met in a certain furnished place, whereby they booked the place, and also some of the leaders of Azimio met with them in that place, in a secret place, for 5 consecutive days. Now let us move on to other stories, whereby fees shocker for varsity students. This whereby rethinking higher education proposed funding model will see fewer students get government sponsorship, unlike today when all students who score the minimum university entry grade are eligible for support. This is likely to cause a resurgence of self-sponsored or parallel programs. This is the story that we shall find on page 7, whereby only a few students who will benefit from the government sponsorship that is in the university, and only a few of the students who will be able maybe to join universities there after meeting the minimum requirement entry grade. So that story shall find it on page 7 of the Daily Nation. But also matters to do with education, there is a story that we shall find on page 2 of the Daily Nation, whereby 96 new pay deal delegates conference to discuss 2021 to 2025 collective bargaining agreement. We shall find that story on page 2, as I have told you. And then finally, there is a story whereby way 2 says MCA's county politicians push for law on award fund. It is all about the complaints of the members of the county assemblies, whereby they are saying that they need also to be recognized, whereby after the amendments to take back or entrench the NGCDF fund to the constitution, whereby the MPs will continue benefiting from the NGCDF. But now they are also saying that if the MPs have to benefit from this one, from the NGCDF, they have to be given NGCDF. Also, we need cash, we need something that will go out there and showcase what we can do to our people, money that we shall use for development in our various areas. It is a story which has been written on page 8 of the Daily Nation. Now, as we move on, let us look at what is inside the newspapers. Page 2, we find that this lady was born when this man was still behind the bars, was in prison. He was serving his term in prison, and you know, it is kind of a nice story here. So we find that when Bishop, for 31 years, the groom had spent his life under the watchful eye of uncompromising prison officers at the Naivasha Maximum Security Prison. For close to a decade, he was on death row, having been sentenced for robbery with violence in August 1991. So you can just imagine that he was arrested back in 1991 and he had been serving in jail. So, and actually he was supposed to be killed. Actually he was sentenced to death, but right along the yale mashtaka yakaweza kubadilishwa, and so he continued and served for that 1 year, whereby being capital offender, he was a pariah, only allowed 30 minutes in the sun each day. Yani anatolewa nje na utajua kwa dakika 30 peke yake, kisha anarudishwa ndani. Na hapa hivi anasema ya kwamba when interacting with the others, I was always in handcuffs. Banks shackle was a cardinal ruler for death row inmates. The groom recalled. The death sentence was later commuted to life. His remarkable transformation behind bars, where he was the main trustee and also a preacher, earned him freedom 10 months ago. You know, and aliwachiliwa miezi 10 tu iliyopita. That's when he was released from jail after reforming. You know, he was to serve life sentence in jail. Mimi nisiambiwe Peter, wewe ni mzee. Nimezeeka wapi? Mimi si mzee, nimezeeka wapi? Kama huyu mzee alienda jela, amefungwa for 31 years. By the time he's coming back, anapata mrembo amezaliwa, amekuwa na sasa ni mkewe. Okay, now let us move on to a different story. That story you shall find it. You can read that nice story on page 3 of the Daily Nation, but on page 4 of the Daily Nation, we find a different story whereby Azimio leaders met Cherera for 8 Hotel. This is a story that we have been. It is a developing story about the Cherera 4. So, and there is a probe. It is a probe about Cherera, Nyang'aya, and Wanderi have since all resigned, but Masit is demanding a stop to the tribunal. Evidence provided by Yaya Apartments could tie the IBC chiefs to the Raila Odinga-led team. And we find that the 4 besieged electoral commissioners booked into a high-end furnished apartment after their explosive press conference on August 15, where they disowned the presidential election results. And over the next 5 days, met high-profile Azimio Umoja One Kenya coalition leaders evidence before the tribunal investigating their conduct has shown. Yani haya ni mambo ambayo yanaendelea kutokeza pale katika shughuli nzima za uchunguzi huu ambao unaendelezwa na the tribunal that was formed by the president led by the judge of the Court of Appeal, that is Agri Muchelule, who is leading this tribunal to determine the fate of the 4. And I remember 3 of them, that is Juliana Cherera, Justice Nyang'aya, and Francis Wanderi have resigned, but Irene Masita amesema no, hakuna pale naenda. So, and they are still facing the tribunal. And we find that there is this story whereby it has been said that they booked, after disowning the election, they are disowning the presidential results, they went into a different place whereby it has been said that somebody from Azimio booked the room for them, a place for them. And also they met with different leaders from Azimio Umoja who visited them in such a place. It is an evidence that has been shown there. And we find that Yaya Apartment has presented records showing that the 4 checked into the building on August 15 with their booking done by a person identified as Edwin Ongonga Ogwe. The hotel has released the visitors book, the lodging details, payment vouchers, as well as CCTV footage and identity of some of Azimio leaders who visited the commissioners, including the Secretary General of a party in the coalition, a personal assistant of one of the party leaders, as well as a leading operative who was in the outfit's executive council. Now that is a story that we shall keep on following, and we know maybe by next month we shall have the full details on whether these people shall will be removed from the office or not. Now on page 5 we find that IEBC MP's weakest link in electoral process, and we find that Electoral Commission praised for conducting free, fair and credible elections in August. And we find that National Assembly and Senate accused of sitting on at least 5 laws that were to guide the 2022 elections. Hapa ni pale ambapo it is an audit that shows that Electoral Commissioner IEBC conducted a free, fair and credible elections that is in August. Parliament was the weakest link in the electoral process by frustrating the passage of legislation critical to the management of elections in the country. The Electoral Commission has said this came as development partners praised the Independent Electoral and Boundaryless Commission IEBC for conducting free, fair and credible elections in August. Yani wanaendelea kupewa sifa kocho pale kwa sababu ya kuweza kupanga na kutekeleza ama kuhakikisha kwamba kuna uchaguzi ambao ni wa huru, haki na wa amani. Na pia vile vile, as we move on page 6 of the Daily Nation, we find that Uhuru to resign as Jubilee party leader. Kega reveals. Hapa ni pahali ambapo the former president Uhuru Kenyatta has to resign as the Jubilee party leader, and as we know that he is a party leader, and it is a party that made he used to get back into the state house, that is back in 2017, whereby he won the elections using this party of Jubilee. And we find that former president is currently engaged in a number of peace initiatives in Africa. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to resign as the chairman of Azimio Umoja One Kenya Coalition Council and leader of Jubilee Party. The Jubilee Party leadership has said it does not want to entangle him as he continues with the peace initiatives he is spearheading. President Kenyatta used the Jubilee Party to clinch the presidency in the 2017 general election. Therefore, for the August 2022 polls, the party joined others to form Azimio, which had Mr. Raila Odinga as the presidential candidate. Jubilee's Director of Elections, Kanini Kega, announced that President Kenyatta will soon be handing over the party's leadership mantle to focus on his new role. This is Kanini Kega, who is so ambaye tunajua ni ya kwamba he's a Jubilee's Director of Elections. Yani yeye amesema kwamba inaonekana kuenda rais mstaafu Uhuru Kenyatta akaweza kujiuzuru kutoka katika wadhifa wake kama kiongozi wa chama cha Jubilee na pia vile vile kama mwenyekiti wa mrengo wa Azimio la Umoja wa Kenya ambao ulimfanya ama ambao ulimtangaza Raila Odinga kama mwaniaji wa kiti cha urais mapema mwaka huu katika uchaguzi ambao uliopita. Na sasa kutokana na shughuli nzima ambazo imekuwa nazo pale za kuleta amani katika mataifa jirani yakiwemo taifa la Ethiopia pamoja na ile lingine la Kongo, ni kwamba wanaona vyema aweze kupeana uongozi katika kwa mtu mwingine ili kuhakikisha kwamba anaweza kuwa na nafasi bora ya kuendeleza shughuli zake za kuleta amani katika bara nzima la Afrika kama jinsi ambavyo aliweza kutwikwa lile jukumu. Now, and as we move on to a different story on page 7, we find that new funding plan to see a return of parallel students in public universities. Is it affordability? Universities Fund boss says increasing fees is not an option as many parents are struggling financially. Head of State recently said the government will only pay for as many university students as it can afford. Hapa ni pale ambapo rais alisema ya kwamba ni baadhi tu ya wanafunzi ambao wana mahitaji, the needy students, na ni wanafunzi ambao serikali tu ambao itakaweza kuwalipia karo. Kwa hivyo ina maana kwamba baadhi ya wanafunzi ambao wamekuwa kifaidika na bali kubwa ya wanafunzi ambao wamekuwa kifaidika na mgao wa fedha kutoka kwa serikali katika kuweza kusimamia elimu ya juu zaidi, sasa hivi inaonekana kuenda wakaweza kulemewa na ule mzigo ama serikali ikaweza kuachana zile shughuli za kuwalipia. So kwa hivyo inakuwa ni jambo ambalo linaleta wasiwasi na kiwewe kwa wazazi wengi pamoja na wanafunzi ambao wanajiuliza iwapo huenda wanafunzi wengi wakakosa kujiunga na chuo na vyuo vikuu humu nchini kwa sababu ya ukosefu wa fedha ambazo zaweza kutumika kulipa karo na pia vile vile kwa mahitaji mengine, yani ikiwa na maana kwamba baadhi ya wanafunzi ambao watakuwa wamepita lakini hawataweza kunufaika na labda wametoka katika familia ambazo zina uzito wa aina yake wa kifedha, huenda wakakosa kubahatika. Now we find that changes how module 2 programs ended up. Before 2016, public universities admitted thousands of self-sponsored students, earning billions from them. From 2016, there were very few students who attained the minimum C+ grade in the KCSE exam for university entry. All the students who are therefore sponsored by the government. The move saw all the public universities become cash-strapped. Private universities have also been struggling to get students, with the government looking to only sponsor the number of students it can afford. A return of the Module 2 programs, popularly known as parallel programs, seems to be in the offing. So it is a kind of a story there whereby I know that but let's hope for the best, whereby the students who are in Form 4, those ones who are waiting to join universities will benefit. Now let us move on to a different story on page 8 of the Daily Nation, whereby we find that MCAs in fresh push forward fund. Hawa ni madiwani ama tuwaite wakilishi wadi ambao wanasema ya kwamba pia wanahitaji kukumbukwa, wakaweza kukumbukwa pale na viongozi mbalimbali ama wakaweza kukumbukwa na serikali, wakaweza kupewa mgao wa fedha ili kuhakikisha kwamba katika maeneo wanakotoka ambako ama wanawakilisha wakaweza kupeleka maendeleo katika maeneo yale ili kuhakikisha kwamba mambo yote yako sawa. And this one comes after members of the National Assembly want the Constituency Development Fund embedded in the Constitution. The organization has rallied county assemblies to petition MPs to include the money in their amendment bill. There is a glaring exclusion of a fund that will support growth in our villages and ensure equitable sharing of devolved funds. This is CFF Chair Kibragat Sabulei. Ya huyu ni mwenyekiti wa wabunge wa ni wabunge mno wawakilishi wale wote humu nchini pamoja na maspika. And we find that members of the county assemblies have initiated a fresh plan to push for the inclusion of the county-wide equitable development fund in the proposed constitutional amendment bill that is seeking the retention of the national government constituency development fund, that is the NGCDF, through their umbrella body County Assemblies Forum CAF. The MCAs said the amendment which targets the NGCDF, the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, that is NGAAF, the Economic Stimulus Empowerment Fund, and the Senate Oversight Fund should also include their allocation. So we find that these are the some of the funds that will be given to various leaders, whereby NGCDF will be given to the leaders, that to the MPs, NGAF will be given to women representative, and also there is a Senate Oversight Fund which will be given to all the 47 senators in our countries. That's why even the Kenyan MCAs are requesting there to be given funds also for them to take development to the various places in our country. Now, as we move on to page 10 of the Daily Nation, we find Kenya Power pays extra 3.6 billion Kenyan shillings in debt on a strong dollar. A weekend shilling cost Kenya Power an extra 3.63 billion in debt repayment, even as the company considered billing some of its customers in foreign currency to lower its forex cost. So hapo ni pahali ambapo tunapata ya kwamba Kenya Power huenda wakalipa fedha nyingi katika madeni ambayo walionayo kutokana na pea ama shilingi ya Kenya kuweza kushuka na kupoteza thamana yake kwa mataifa ama kwa pesa zingine kama vile dola ama ya Marekani, na ambayo imepelekea Kenya kujipata katika deni ambalo linakadiria shilingi bilioni 3.6 ambalo lingeweza kuepukika. Na ndio maana Kenya Power wameona ya kwamba huenda wakatumia zile pesa ambazo ni za huko nje ama mataifa mengine ili kuhakikisha kwamba wameweza kushughulikia mahitaji haya kwa njia ambayo ina fine. Then we find that COP15, where global leaders are meeting in Canada, as a climate change conversation died down, the momentum for a possible framework on protecting 30% of land and the sea is building. This is the second week of a United Nations conference on biodiversity that is supposed to come up with new decade-long goals for saving Earth's biodiversity, and it is happening in Montreal, Canada. It is the 15th conference of parties, COP15, attended by delegates of about 190 countries who signed the Convention on Biological Diversity, that is CBD, in 1992, Kenya being one of them. Haya ni mambo tu ambayo yanahusiana na mabadiliko ya tabia nchi ndiyo bado yanaendelea kuangaziwa. Na pia vile vile ICT Ministry launches free wifi at Mudhurwa Market. So kwa hivyo watu wa Mudhurwa pale, naona ICT and Digital Economy Cabinet Secretary Eliud Owalo alikuwa amewatembelea pale kuhakikisha kwamba wameweza kupata the ICT ama wameweza kupata wifi ambayo ni ya bure ni katika soko la Mudhurwa. Pia vile vile, as we move on, we find that WHO rises measles alarm as global outbreak sparks worry. And we find that it is a concern if countries do not contain outbreak, it could result in death of serious bodily harm. And we find that yesterday's newspaper, we find that over 40 children have been affected by the measles, but the government is trying to make sure that in some parts of Turkana County they will vaccinate over 100,000 children. So we find that here on this newspaper they say that 1.2 million children aged between 9 and 59 months who are targeted in a measles vaccination drive across 7 counties. So we find that flare-up in 7 counties has prompted a vaccination drive by the Ministry of Health. The World Health Organization, WHO, has declared measles an imminent global threat amid an increase in outbreaks. So it is a kind of a story that is in the Daily Nation page 10. And as we move on, we find quite a nice story here, whereby we find that 5,000-year-old burial ground discovered in Lake Turkana. And we find that the results of the Jarigol. Ni Jarigol? Ama ni Jarigole? Jarigol excavations have now been published in the latest issue of Antiquity Journal. And we find that new findings from the Jarigol site resolve long-standing questions about Eastern Africa's earliest monument. And we find that Kenya faltered after financial push out of 20 billion shillings project. And in 2016, the National Urban Transport Improvement Project implemented by Kenya and funded by the International Development Agency was initiated. Wakati huo ndio ilipoanzishwa. The Kenya National Highway Authority, Kenya is on the spot after a financial pulled out of 20.4 billion Kenya shillings deal to fund an infrastructure project whose delayed completion is now solely in the hands of the government. On page 14 tunapata ya kwamba conmen target maize growers with fake deals in selling spree. So hapo ni pahali ambapo kumejitokeza matapeli ambao wamejitokeza ili kuhakikisha kwamba wamenunua mahindi ya wakulima kwa bei ambayo ni guchi sana na kuhakikisha kwamba hawataweza kufaidika. So it is a warning that has been set by the government in ensuring that the Kenyans they have saved their lives from the hands of these people called conmen. And we find that fake traders are buying grains using bad checks or on credit which they don't pay. Hani watu ambao wanakuja wananunua pesa na checks ambazo wananunua nazo lakini ni gushi, ni pesa ni checks ambazo ni bandia. So ni njia moja ya kuwargaini na kuwaibia Wakenya kwa kile ambacho wanasema kwamba ni njia moja ya kuwanunulia, lakini ni kuwaibia. Vile vile unapata ya kwamba wananunua kwa madeni ambayo baadaye hawezi kuyalipa. Wanakataa kulipa yale madeni kwa wale wananchi ambao wanawauzia mahindi. Kwa hivyo it is a warning that has been sent to the Kenyans to make sure that they are very cautious and they are very keen in what they are doing right now in ensuring that they do not sell their produce to people, to these people called conmen. And we find that local readers have advised the farmers to be wary and release their produce after receiving payment in full. Hakuna kuachilia mahindi, hakuna kuachilia mazao ya shamba lako pia kabla haujaweza kulipwa pesa zote ambazo zinahitajika kwa kuweza kulipwa. Kwa hivyo ni ombi ambalo linaendelea kutolewa pale, and we find that 5,400 shillings hiyo ni bei mpya ambayo ipo katika gunia moja la kilo 90. So it is the price of 90 kilo bag of maize which is expected to go down as more farmers release their harvested crop to the market. Bei hii inaonekana huenda ikaweza kupungua baada ya wakulima kuweza kuachilia mazao yao ama kuweza kuuza mazao yao, na hivyo bei hii ambayo ni shilingi 5,400 itaweza kupungua. And we find that a rush by cereal farmers in the North Rift region to sell their produce to avert possible losses following government plans to import 10 million bags of maize is exposing them to fraudsters. Conmen have flocked markets in the region to buy grains using bad checks, while others buy the produce on credit but fail to pay, subjecting farmers to huge losses. Local leaders led by US Ngishu Governor Jonathan B have advised farmers to be wary of fraudsters and release their produce only after receiving payment in full. So kwa hivyo ni vitu ambao unaendelea kutolewa kwa wakulima pale kutoka maeneo yale ya bonde la Ufa upande ule wa kusini, wakaweza kuhakikisha kwamba wanapoendelea na shughuli zao nzima za kuuza mazao yao kwa wale watu ambao wananunulia, they should be very cautious of these people called fraudsters and conmen who will buy their products by checks, but these checks are fake, and also buy on credit which they do not pay. And remember, this comes after the government announcing that it will import 10 million bags of maize from it will import that is, and thus they gave that grace period for Kenyan farmers to sell their product, to release their product. So, and this is what has caused this issue of conmen and fraudsters who are still buying the maize of the farmers in most of the parts of Northern Rift. Now, as we move on, we still find a different story concerning education inequality, still a cause for concern for children in pastoralist areas. It is a story here. It is a kind of a story that has been written here. And we find that education is a fundamental right for every child. It is crucial for their learning and development, and it is indisputably a key mechanism for reducing poverty at household and national levels. The government of Kenya, through its education sector reform plan, has made a commitment to improving education, and there has been significant traction in implementing reforms such as CBC that addresses the quality of education in the country. So these are kind of a story called a column, and it is a nice column that has been written here by this person called Yvonne Arunga, who says it is all about Save the Children country. So direct from Kenya and Madagascar. It is a kind of a nice story. I think that everyone needs to read this story about how we need to save our children. Now, as we move on winding up, we find that Lenko opposes ban on banning primary schools, and we find that Kajiado Governor Joseph Ole Lenko has opposed government plans to abolish boarding schools at the primary level. The policy will affect access to education in pastoralist regions, and here it is Ole Lenko, Joseph Ole Lenko, the governor for Kajiado, who have said that he is opposing the proposal to banning off these boarding primary schools. And remember, the government last week said that it will ban all the primary boarding schools here in Kenya. Now, it is a story which is still on page 14 of the Daily Nation. And lastly, as we move on, so we always look at this story called Cartoon. Na tukiangalia cartoon siku ya leo, we find different people here. We find a very big ship here that is written Azimio. Imeandikwa Azimio pale. It is in a lake or a sea somewhere. And we find that there are some people here, some people whom I can say that they are pirates, either pirates or even wale watu ambao tunasema, how do we call them? Captains, yes. The captains, not pirates. So ukiangalia utapata there are some captains na ni wengi, there are about 6 of them, and we find that ni wengi. So we find there is kuna mmoja kwa boat pale ametulia tu pale kwa boat. Then we have another one who have been thrown from the ship to the lake, and we find some other 3 people within this ship whereby I can be able to recognize the 2 of them, that is Jeremiah Ngao Kioni and also Junet Mohammed. And also there is another person who is still in the wreck here making a phone call. Nikimwangalia vizuri naona huyu ni Babu Owino. Na pia vile vile ukiangalia upande mwingine utaona kuna mtu mwingine, kunaonekana kuna captain ambaye amezama baharini, bado anaendelea kupoint akiwa huko ndani, anahitaji aweze kupata usaidizi, na hivyo ndivyo hali ilivyo upande huo. Nikimalizia kabisa sasa hivi, as I usually tell you, a good pastor finishes 7 times and we find that Morocco dream on France history. Tunapotea kwamba dark horses injury worries cool crowd campaign as West Ham defender missed the quarters. So unapotea kwamba leo ni kivumbi, najua ni Ni mchezo ambao watu wengi wanatarajia leo mwendo wa saa 4 usiku ambapo France watakuwa kimenyana pale na Morocco katika semi finali. Who will be the winner? And you know the best thing tofauti kati ya Morocco na France ni ya kwamba Morocco comes from Africa and France haiko within Africa, but you find that when these two teams will be playing, you find that Morocco players, they are much likely to be outside from Africa, but the France wao ndio wanakaa wa Afrika, watu weusi kama sisi tu, so you find kutakuwa na confusion kidogo. So wale utaona wewe wakicheza weupe, hao ndio Morocco ndio wa Afrika, so na hao wengine ndio wa kutoka katika nchi ya Ufaransa pale. And that marks the end of our newspaper review right now, but the Daily Nation that is, but I shall be right back with the Standard newspaper right alone after taking a very short commercial break. Don't go too far. My name is Peter Kamau. Thank you so much for watching Daesak TV, the creator of goodness. We are right back. Thank you for staying tuned, and remember you can just follow us on our social media handles, that is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Daesak TV, and also you can just send us your SMS on a number running below your screen. And remember, this is the morning edition. My name is Peter Kamau, and we have just looked at what is making the headlines in the Daily Nation and the stories which are in the Daily Nation. Now I just want us to look at what is in the Standard newspaper today, and remember we have a lot for you here which are so I shall be sharing with you. It is much about President William Ruto, who has gone outside the country, who visited America to attend the US African Summit, which started yesterday. And we find that it is the story which is making headline on the Standard newspaper, whereby Ruto looks west to fulfill hustler dream, and whereby diplomacy is it has been termed as diplomacy shift, whereas his predecessor revealed in Chinese loans to deliver their campaign manifesto. President Ruto hopes Europe and America will help him drive his agenda. It is a story that we shall find on page 4 of the Standard newspaper, and we find that some of the leaders that maybe President William Ruto is looking up to in ensuring that his dream he is able to drive his agenda. It is Joe Biden. The US President Joe Biden is hosting African leaders, and on Kenya he looks forward to see Ruto soon. Here is in Washington to further deepen and expand our partnership. That is Joe Biden who sits so. And also we find on the other side it is all about William Ruto and President, apart from delivering a statement on the future of Africa trade relations with the US, will engage with the private sector to explore investment opportunities. Now lastly, there is other people here, other leaders here, that is Kristalina Georgieva, and after government made a raft of conditions including trimming the budget and restructuring state corporations, IMF is set to approve 43.3 billion Kenya shillings facility. So unapata ya kwamba ni baada ya bajeti kuweza kuwa ama mgao wa fedha wa bajeti wa mwaka 2022 na 2023, IMF imeweza kujitolea kuhakikisha kwamba imeweza kupatia Kenya ile deni ya shilingi bilioni 43.3. Na pia vile vile we find another person here, that is Rishi Sunak. Anasema this whereby UK government recently approved the fact tracking of climate change programmers worth 500 billion shillings. They have already put in place 12 billion to finance the Nairobi Railway City project. So unapata ni serikali ya Uingereza ambayo imejitolea kuweza kufadhili ujenzi wa barabara ama wa reli ya kutoka Nairobi ya reli ya Nairobi kwa kitita cha shilingi bilioni 12 pale, na pia vile vile ni baada ya kuweza kutoa ama kupeana kitita cha shilingi bilioni 500 ambacho kitatumika katika masuala ya kuangazia mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. It is a story that we shall find in depth on page 4 of the Standard newspaper. Now, as we move on our different stories, we find that why Azimio was bound to lose elections. An observer group in its final report says there is no way the Raila-led group could have countered the hustler narrative in the polls. It is a story that we shall find on page 8 of the Standard newspaper. And also we have different stories whereby teacher union demand 60% salary rise, and it is a story that we shall find on page 7 of the Standard newspaper. And suppliers drug ban hurting many. It is a business story that we shall find on page 24. And also we find that Ramaphosa survives ouster bid. Yani pale Ramaphosa ambaye ni rais wa nchi ya South Africa ameweza kuepuka shoka ambalo lilikuwa linamkabili la kuweza kung'atuliwa kutoka afisini. It is a story that we shall find on page 26. All eyes on Morocco in French test. That is a story that we shall find on page 38. Then lastly we find that how the Obama name came to be. Je, Obama alijulikana vipi? Wacha tutakuja kujua baadaye pale katika ukurasa wa 14 na ukurasa wa 15 wa gazeti hili la The Standard. Na pia vile vile we find other stories that is whereby hustler narrative sank Baba Iloga. The introduction of class as versus them. Politics in the aftermath of 2018 handshake has been cited as the defining factor of this year's polls. It is a story that we shall find on page 8. And also other stories is all about COG, County of Governors, not County of Governors, Council of Governors, fears over delayed 90 billion shillings. County bosses say they have so far received only 122.1 billion this financial year and rejected raise of funds based on absorption rate. That is a story that we shall find on page 20. And also Safaricom to outsource staff. Safaricom plans to outsource its sales workforce as part of plans to restructure and cut costs. Internal documents by the company shows. That is a story on page 24. And also it's all about Ramaphosa, as I have told you, and Morocco. Then there is a story here, letter from Maseno. Walk towards a zero gas emission, save world on climate change. The consequences of climate change have had a huge impact on marginalized communities, women, and the youths. Climate change has led to more frequent extreme weather events like drought and famine, more severe storms, loss of species, inadequate food supplies, more health risks, poverty and displacement, amongst other effects that have adversely affected more than 2 million Kenyans. It is a story that you shall find it, you can read it on page 2 of the Standard newspaper. Then also we find a different story whereby war between church tradition rages on 100 years later. And we find vita ambavyo vita vya masuala ya kikanisa na kitamaduni bado yanaendelea kushuhudiwa katika baadhi sana sana hata baada ya miaka 100 ya tangu kuanzishwa kwa kanisa. And we find that thousands of teenage boys are recovering in barracks under the hawkish eyes of Bible crouching elders to be schooled on complexities of adulthood. The boys have been undergoing rigorous training of how to transit from boys to men after being subjected to a physical rite of passage. In church, organized circumcision programs initiates are charged between 7,000 to 40,000 for circumcision, while it costs 1,000 shillings for a cut organized by traditional elders. So haya ni baadhi ya vita ambavyo vinaendelea kushuhudiwa marumano baina ya tamaduni na makanisa kuhusiana na kupashwa tohara kwa wavulana. So it is a story that has been mentioned there, or even that has been written on page 2 of the Standard newspaper. Then we find that family of a man who died during World Cup match 6 answers. So kuna huyu kijana ambaye inaonekana kwamba alienda pale katika nchi ya Qatar kama alienda pale kufanya kazi, lakini akaweza kuaga dunia kwa kile ambacho kinasemekana ni kuanguka. Alianguka kwa umbali ambao bado haujajulikana. Kenya who worked as security guard allegedly fell from a significant height and sustained serious injuries. Family says circumstances behind fall unclear and wants help from the Kenya and Qatari authorities as well as FIFA. So hapa ni pale ambapo familia inalilia taifa la Kenya, taifa la Qatar pamoja na FIFA, ambapo huyu kijana alipokuwa akifanya kazi kama mlinzi ama mlinda lango pale, na ambapo inasemekana alianguka, na alipoanguka haijajulikana alianguka kwa umbali upi na alianguka kutoka wapi, na kijana mdogo sana. Ukiangalia ni kijana wa miaka 24 pale, ambaye anajulikana kama John Njau Kibe, ambaye kunasemekana alianguka pale katika uwanja wa Lusail Stadium wakati Argentina wakicheza na nchi ya Uholanzi ama Netherlands. So it is a story ambayo imeandikwa pale, and we find that dadake ambaye anafahamika kama Anne Wanjiru anasema ya kwamba we hear he had worked for long hours. The clarity of how he fell is not coming out. So inaonekana kana kwamba kuna jambo ambalo linificha pale, ambalo haijajulikana ni vipi hali hii ilivyoafikiwa, na ambapo huu kijana aliweza kuanguka na akaweza kuaga dunia. Now as we move on, we find that the woman's body to be flown home 4 months after death. Hapa ni Kenyan embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia will help bring back the body of a woman who died 4 months ago. Jackson Karanja yesterday said officials from the embassy contacted him saying that the body of his wife Hannah Njeri will arrive on Friday. And I think this is a case that we mentioned last week about this lady by the name Hannah Njeri who died in Saudi, and her body is expected to be to be brought back here in Kenya. And there is he continues and says that after a long wait in agony, I now have hope that I can finally give my wife a befitting send-off. Njeri traveled in August last year for a job, a domestic worker. Relatives say the 26-year-old had complained of mistreatment by her first employer, who handed her to another in an unclear deal. It has been a long journey since she revealed her suffering at the hands of the employer. She always contacted me, but I had no means, said Karanja. Matters took a different turn after a recruiting agency that linked her to the job allegedly crossed shop with another agent opening a similar business at the same premises in Nairobi. I lost contact with her in the last week of August. In our last conversation, she told me she had been taken to a deportation center where she and others were waiting to return home. Kenyans who reached out to the family claim Njeri died after she fell from a top floor at the deportation center. It was not clear whether she and others were escaping from the center or she was pushed over by someone. We are yet to find out, but either way, it is a pain that we lost her, said the husband. So it is a story about this lady by the name Njeri who went to work, Hannah Njeri, who went to work in those countries, that is in Saudi Arabia, who died there after being mistreated by the first employer. Then later on she was given to another employer, whereby so inasemekana ya kwamba she was about to be deported. So in the deportation center they said that she felt so some information says that she fell from a wall, but it is not clear whether she was trying to escape together with others or even she was thrown by someone from the same place who thrown her to that side, which caused her death. Now it is unclear, but the joy is that the family will be able to give her a send-off after the body being deported here in Kenya. So then we find that it is a kind of a story which is kind of frustrating, and we have been cautioning people, we have been talking about these matters, and when you look at this case, you find that some of the people who can be blamed here, they are the agencies, whereby you find that this person who the husband went to the agencies whereby who took her to that place, but he tried to plead with them, but later on he find that the shop was closed, the place that office was closed, and another business has been set there, also an agency. So, and it is something that the government should put in, should look at it and ensuring that Kenyans who go out there to work in those countries are safe and they are working in good conditions and good environments on hands of good people in those countries, because we don't want to have such kind of similar, we don't want to have similar cases in recent in coming days in future. Yeah, you know, it is kind of a sad story when you lose someone. Actually, she's very young, 26 years old. She's very, very young. It means that if we continue with the same norm, it means that we might lose as many people, as many of our daughters, sisters, and relatives to such kind of scenarios. So the government should put in place all the measures in ensuring that Kenyans are safe in those countries. And if they have to ban their licenses for those agencies, it is better. So if so that we may be having the legit ones, so which will be taking people to work in those countries and be able to do follow-ups of how these people are living in those countries and their progress in those countries. Now, on a different story, we find that Bohla community leader gets top honors, and we find that His Holiness Sayyidina Mufadala Saifuddin, the leader of the worldwide Dawoodi Bohla community, was among 460 who were feted by President William Ruto on the Jamhuri Day. And you know, this is a story that we mentioned yesterday about those people who were honored by the president. Those are the people on during the Jamhuri Day. It is a story which is on page 3 of the Standard newspaper. As we move on, we find on page 4, we find that lobby wants to ban DP from taking over power. A group has proposed changes to the constitution that, if adopted, will see the deputy president barred from running the presidency for president immediately after his or her term as the president's principal assistant ends. So it is a group of people which here it is lobbying. It is an operation leader Ugatuzi wants the DP allowed to run for presidency after the expiry of the least 5 years. So hapo ni pale ambapo wanasema kwamba wanataka pindi tu naibu wa rais anapo staafu kutoka katika ule wadhifa wake kama naibu wa rais asiweze kupigania kiti cha urais, na kama jinsi ambavyo tuliona mnamo mapema mwaka huu ambapo Rais William Ruto aliweza kupigania kiti cha urais na kungatuka kuweza kushinda ule uchaguzi baada tu ya kuwa naibu wa rais kwa takriban miaka 10. Na hivyo basi ndio maana wanapendekeza kwamba kuweze kuwepo na sheria ambayo itakayosema ya kwamba hakuna kupigania kiti cha urais iwapo na naibu wa rais kama hujamaliza miaka 5 nje baada ya kustaafu kama naibu wa rais. And on a different story, Fancy Yes Owalo launches free Wi-Fi hotspots at Wakulima and Modhurwa market. It is a story that we have already mentioned on the Daily Nation. And on this paper, that is the Standard, we find a different story whereby Ruto clocks 100 days but back of promises not met. So tunapata ya kwamba tunaelekea kufikia siku zipatazo 100 tangu Rais William Ruto aliponyakua ama alipoweza kuchukua hatamu za uongozi katika taifa letu la Kenya. Lakini kuna mambo mengi sana ambayo yanasemekana kwamba hajaweza kuyatimiza na ambayo alikuwa ameahidi ya kwamba pindi baada ya siku 100 afisini ataweza kuwa ameweza kutimiza. The government allocated 3.5 billion shillings to subsidize fertilizer for planting food crops. Unapata ya kwamba serikali imeweza kuweka kitita cha shilingi bilioni 3.55 kama ruzuku ya mbolea ambayo itakayotumika ili kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba tuna vyakula vya kutosha katika taifa letu la Kenya. Despite efforts in agriculture sector, fruits of strategy are yet to be felt by Kenya's President William Ruto has failed to actualize almost 50% of the promises he committed to achieve in his first 100 days. Unapata ya kwamba ni eti Rais William Ruto hajaweza kufikia nusu ya mambo ambayo aliweza kuahidi ataweza kuwa ameyatimiza kwa muda wa siku 100 tu hivi ambazo atakuwa katika afisi. And then on a different story on page 6 we find that Ruto and Raila renew West East diplomatic war. In the past, Uhuru and Kibaki administration dealt largely with the Chinese government, and Raila accused Western countries of conspiring to rig him out of the August polls. Hapa ni pale ambapo tunaona ya kwamba marais wastaafu ambaye alikuwa ni rais ni hayati mzee Mwai Kibaki pamoja na rais mstaafu Uhuru Kenyatta walikuwa wakitafuta msaada katika nchi za Uchina, na lakini ukiangalia unapata ya kwamba rais William Ruto anakimbia katika nchi mataifa mengine ambayo ni ya Marekani kuweza kujipatia usaidizi, na ndio maana Raila Odinga anasema he is accusing those countries for the West countries because on what he says that tries to conspiring to rig him out of the August polls. So unapata ya kwamba ni matamshi yake Raila ambapo anaendelea kusema ya kwamba ama kukashifu mataifa hayo ambayo yanafahamika kama West countries. So and as the dust settles following a divisive electioneering period, a new battle front between President William Ruto and opposition leader Raila Odinga is shaping up on Kenya's foreign policy. Should the country lean towards the west or look east? Ni swali ambalo linaulizanwa, and we find that bilateral talks Kenya on agenda. Now let us look at what are some of the agendas that Kenya have with other countries, and we find there are so many countries which are here, which has been mentioned here, which Kenya has agendas with, and there are some proposals that have been made to these countries by the Kenyan government in ensuring that Kenya has got what it needs for it to move on and live, or even just to progress. And we find that United Kingdom, it is one of the countries. We have different countries whereby the Kenya is having the dialogue with, and we find that there is United Kingdom, Spain, United States, Germany, Slovakia, France and Colombia, Germany and South Korea. And in the United Kingdom, we find on November 7, President held talks with the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Ruto said Kenya welcomes the decision by UK to fast-track new green investments in the country. And again, Ruto said Kenya is committed to more cooperation in areas such as peace, security, energy, agriculture and infrastructure. Hayo ni baadhi ya mambo aliweza kuzungumzia mnamo tarehe 7 mwezi November. November 4, also in UK, President said that he held talks with the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who is also the executive chairman of the Tony Blair Institute of Global Change. Hayo ni waliweza kuzungumza na yule aliyekuwa waziri wa zamani wa nchi ile, na wakaweza kuna mambo kadha wa kadha ambao waliweza kuzungumzia. Katika nchi nyingine ya Hispania ama Spain, tunapata ya kwamba October 26 held bilateral talks with the President of Kingdom of Spain Sanchez Castellón at a State House. Ruto says Kenya will work with Spain to mitigate effects of climate change and advance international peace and security. Hapa ni pale marais hawa wawili wa Hispania na hapa Kenya walipokuwa na mazungumzo na wakaweza kuelewana ya kwamba wataweza kushughulikia masuala ambayo ni ya tabia nchi, na pia vile vile kuangazia masuala ambayo ni ya amani na utulivu na usalama katika mataifa haya mawili. And then on the other story, it is all about United States. Katika nchi ya Marekani, tunapata ya kwamba December 13, that is yesterday, held meetings with the leaders from Google, YouTube, Microsoft, Visa, Meta, Mastercard and MultiChoice before Jamhuri Day Fete. So unapata ya kwamba waliweza kukutana na hawa watu wote hapo jana, ambapo waliweza kukutana na makampuni haya. Ni makampuni ambayo tunajua ni makubwa kama kampuni ya Google, kampuni ya YouTube, kampuni ya Microsoft, kampuni ya Visa, kampuni ya Meta, kampuni ya Mastercard, kampuni ya MultiChoice. So ni mambo ambayo ama ni watu ambao aliweza kukutana nao. Pia November 16, host Bill Gates alikuwa hapa nchini. Co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation at a State House says Kenya to continue to collaborate on food security and universal healthcare. Hapa ni pale walikutana na Bill Gates wakaweza kuzungumzia masuala hasa ya mambo ya chakula ama kilimo, na pia vile vile kuhusiana na afya bora katika taifa letu la Kenya. Pia vile vile we find that October 3 he met with a discussion with a congregational delegation from US led by Oklahoma Senator Jim Ihofe. Ruto said there is room to increase Kenya US Trade and Technical Partnership. Hapa ni pale ambapo rais alielezea kwamba kuna uwezekano wa kuendeleza shughuli za kibiashara baina ya mataifa haya yote mawili, taifa la Kenya na lile la Marekani. Katika siku ya tarehe 27 mwezi Septemba, aliweza host discussion with US Ambassador to Kenya Meg Whitman at a State House. Ruto said Kenya keen on strengthening ties in trade, agriculture, health and security. Hayo ni baadhi ya mambo walizungumza September 23 at a reception with the US President Joe Biden during UN meeting. Ruto said Kenya will continue expanding strategies partnership with US. On 22nd September, met US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in New York. Ruto pledged to advance bilateral and multilateral partnerships. Haya ni mahusiano tu ambao ni ya kuleta umoja baina ya mataifa haya yote mawili. And also we find that September 21st attends US Kenya Executive Business Roundtable in New York. Ruto said Kenya open for increased business with the USA. Then lastly in USA, meet with that is on September 13. He met with US Trade Representative Catherine Tai, who was the US delegation head at State House. He also met with Germany on November 13, signed climate and development partnership with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And Slovakia on November 8, he held bilateral talks with Slovakia President Zuzana Kaputova on the sidelines of COP27 conference. Ruto said he recognizes the interest of Slovakia firms in energy, transport, construction, infrastructure, water, agriculture and technology that will contribute significantly to Kenya's economic growth. Then he met with France and Colombia, that is on September 30th, whereby Ruto bids farewell to French and Colombia ambassadors to Kenya, Alain Menga and Monica de Graaf Lindo, respectively, after their tour of duty. Says France and Colombia have been critical partners in recent times in infrastructure and trade, and this will continue. In Germany, September 13, former German President Christian Wolff presents Serbia congratulatory message to Ruto. Ruto says Kenya to scale up ties with Germany in areas of technical training, renewable energy, and agriculture. In the last week, he met with South Korea, November 23rd. He talked with South Korea President Yoon Suk Yeol in a fuel and science agreement to allow Kenya export agricultural products. So those are some of the agendas that the government of Kenya has been having with other countries through the President William Ruto here in Kenya and outside the country. Now let us move on. It is a story which is in page 6 of the Daily the Standard newspaper, and on page 7 we find that teachers in new demand for 60% pay rise. Ni pahali ambapo walimu, chama cha kutetea walimu NAT kinaendelea kuambia serikali ama kwamba kusema kinahitaji walimu waweze kuongezewa asilimia 60 ya mshahara yao. So union is also calling for issues of delocalization of tutors to be looked into. Masuala yale ya kuhamisha walimu ambao waliweza kuhamishwa katika maeneo mbali yakaweza kuangaliwa, yakaweza kuangaziwa kwa kina tena upya tena ili kuhakikisha kwamba mambo yote yako sawa. NAT wants TSC to allow them to handle teachers disciplinary cases in the appeal tribunal. Haya ni mambo ambayo tulikuwa tumeangazia katika gazeti la Daily Nation. Then lastly on a different story we find that in Nakuru, court to rule on disputed 435-acre land in Naivasha. The Environment and Land Court in Nakuru will next Tuesday rule on a land case fighting the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, former Commissioner of Lands and two companies. So it is a story ambayo inaendelea pale, ni kuhusiana na masuala yote ambayo ni ya mahakama katika eneo la Naivasha County ya Nakuru. And as we move on, we find a different stories here on page 8. We find that Uhuru to step down as chair of Azimio amid defections. Hili nilikuwa tulikuwa tumeliangalia kuhusiana na aliyekuwa rais Uhuru Kenyatta kuweza kujiondoa kama kiongozi wa chama cha Jubilee na pia vile kiongozi mwenyekiti wa mrengo wa Azimio La Umoja One Kenya. And also on the same page, that is on page 8, we find that Observer reports shows how hustler narrative sank Raila Iloga's political shifted from ethnic to class mobilization, especially due to widespread poverty. The Observer Group supports Supreme Court's recommendation for review of IBC structure. So unapata ya kwamba kuna mambo ambayo inasemekana ya kwamba kulingana na wadadisi na wale ambao walikuwa wakitathmini mambo husika ya uchaguzi, waliona kwamba kuna mambo ambayo hayangefanya Raila Odinga kaweza kuibuka mshindi, kwa sababu William Ruto alianzisha ule mambo wakati alikuja na ile hustler narrative ya kuonyesha kwamba kuna wale ambao walionavyo na wale ambao hawana. So that one led to Raila to lose the election. So hayo ni baadhi ya mambo ambayo yameweza kuangaziwa katika ukurasa wa 8 wa gazeti hili la The Standard. And as we move on to page 10, death sentence for 4 who lynched witches upheld. The Court of Appeal has upheld the death sentence imposed on 4 who lynched suspected witches in Getenge, Kisii County. A 3-judge bench said that the graphic nature in which 2 suspected witches were butchered called for the deterrent sentence delivered by the High Court in Kisii against Dennis Aswela, Amos Bichange Umwacha, and Fred Okeko on July 12, 2016. So ni watu ambao wanakisiwa kuwa walimuua mtu ambaye walisema ya kwamba, ama watu ambao waliwashuku kuwa wachawi katika eneo la Kisii, ambao kifungo chao kingali kinaendelea kutathminiwa baada ya kuhukumiwa kifo na mahakama ya eneo la Kisii. Then we find that state counts hippos in Lake Nakuru as a risk increase. So, and the animal are under serious threat across the African continent. This was the first ground survey at Lake Nakuru after another in Lake Naivasha, except for the early morning drizzles that finally fizzled out. Everything else fell perfectly in place for the hippo census at the Lake Nakuru National Park. Researchers are conducting the exercise to determine the hippo population and its distribution. The animals are under serious threat across the African continent. The exercise also sought to determine the water quality and the lake's depth to ascertain the water levels. Haya ni mambo ambayo yanaangaziwa kuhusiana na hippopotamus. And let us check a little bit here. There is at a glance here that has been mentioned here, and it says the semi-aquatic mammals are found in lakes and rivers across sub-Saharan Africa with an estimated population of 115,000 to 130,000, as well as the trade in ivory found in its teeth and animals' parts. Hippos are threatened by habitat loss and degradation and the effects of global heating. In November 10, West Africa countries made proposals that hippos be given the highest protection under CITES by listing them under Appendix 1 of the Convention. And lastly, hippos are already listed as an Appendix 2 species, which means they are not necessarily threatened with extinction but could become so if their trade is not regulated. So we find that this is all about hippo, vile ambavyo zinaendelea kupungua pale katika ziwa la Nakuru na maziwa mengine baada ya kufanyiwa utathmini katika ziwa la Naivasha. Then we find that on page 11, graduate chiefs in a protest over unfair recruitment terms amid a proposal to assign chiefs police officers. Those with degrees are demoralized a lot for not being promoted. So ni tetezi ambazo zinaendelea kutolewa pale na machifu ya kwamba kuna wale ambao wameweza kuhitimu lakini bado hawajaweza kushughulikiwa ipasavyo na kuweza kupandishwa vyeo. Then on the same page, that is page 11, we find that violent robbery suspect caught on camera detained for 14 days. The victim was shot in the chest and died while undergoing treatment at a Nairobi hospital. The prosecution said a suspect previously served a 6-year jail term for another robbery. So this is a person by the name Peter Waithaka, a former convict allegedly captured on security camera violently robbing a tourist, has been detained for 2 weeks to allow the police complete investigation. Ni mtu ambaye alitolewa jela tena akaja baadaye na alikuwa amehukumiwa, alikuwa ameserve miaka 6 katika jela, so bado tena amerejeshwa pale na anasubiri siku 14 ziishe za kuweza kufanya uchunguzi kwa maafisa wa polisi, kisha baadaye waweze kumfikisha mahakamani na mahakama iweze kufanya maamuzi. Then we find another story on page 12 whereby when kangaroo courts deny sexual abuse victims justice. So kangaroo, ukisikia kangaroo courts, hii ni mahakama ambayo ni ya pale manyumbani, pahali ambapo baada ya mtu kupitia dhuluma fulani, watu wa familia hii na hii wanaketi chini lakini wanafanya maamuzi, lakini inasemekana kwamba maamuzi ambayo wanafanya hayapei haki kwa yule mtu ambaye ni mwathiriwa. So kwa hivyo ina maana ya kwamba kuna mambo ambayo yanahitaji kutekelezwa na kufanyika ili kuhakikisha kwamba kila jambo liko sawa. And you find that defilement, rape and incest cases are on the rise in Central Kenya and perpetrators are relatives. Unapata masuala yote ya ubakaji na unyanyasaji, dhuluma za kijinsia zinatekelezwa na watu wa familia, hasa katika eneo hili la Mlima Kenya. Ndilo ambalo limeangaziwa kwa kina, na ambapo unapata visa hivi vinaendelea, ama watu wanaendelea kuketi chini, vikao vya wazee, wanajadili mambo haya, wanaweza kufanya maamuzi, lakini yule aliyeathiriwa hawezi kupata haki yake. Most cases go unreported since family members don't want to expose their relatives. Now, so we have defilement cases conclude in 1,189. That is total concluded cases. Full trial conviction, it is 567. Withdrawn, 234 cases. Acquittal, 202. Diverted, 13. Plea of guilty, 13. Plea bargain, 13. Now, conviction rate, it is up to 78.6%. Defilement cases in 2020-2021, new registered cases, it is 5,913. That is just 1 year. It is a quite large number whereby people have hii ni kesi kubwa sana hapana. Cases brought forward ni 8,759. Acquittal 802. Cases withdrawn 1,354. Conviction 1,324. Cases pending, it is 11,636. Hizo ndizo cases ambazo ziko pending hadi sasa hivi. And we find that defilement cases for Central Region, Nyeri, Kirinyaga and Murang'a in 2020-2021, new registered cases 470. Cases brought forward 1,011. Acquittal 53. Sorry. Cases withdrawn 84, conviction 101, and cases pending 1,203. So you find that it is quite frustrating for such kind of cases to be held or even to be listened by this court called Kangaroo Court. Tukiendelea unapatia kwamba let's go to Kericho County where married women accused of pushing girls to go for FGM. Hili ni jambo ambalo tumekuwa tukizungumzia sana kuhusiana na FGM, na ambapo unapata ya kwamba wanawake katika maeneo yale wanakuwa accused for pushing girls to go for FGM. Bureti constituency has emerged as the last location in Kericho County where female genital mutilation is still being practiced secretly, with married women undergoing the cut. Kericho County Commissioner John Karungo noted that FGM practitioners in Belgut, Soin or Sigowet, Kipkelion East, Kipkelion West and Ainamoi had felt the heat, and initiates were now being taken to remote areas of Bureti to undergo the cut. So unapata ya kwamba katika baadhi ya maeneo haya swala hili limepigana nalo, lakini eneo hili ambalo linaitwa Bureti wanaendeleza bado jambo Healing. And we find on the same stories that is about the GBV. It's all about lobby group says the rise in teenage pregnancies in city due to lack of family planning commodities, yani kukosa contraceptives ama upangaji uzazi, shughuli ama dawa za kupanga uzazi, ndio kunapelekea kupata kuna zile mimba ya mapema kwa wanafunzi ama kwa watoto. So then on page 14 we find this story, how Obama's grandfather got name link with South Nyanza. So ni jinsi ambavyo ni kuhusiana na jinsi ambavyo Obama aliweza kupata jina, na ni kile kitabu nilikwambia bado kimeandikwa pale na ambacho kinaendelea kuna kiliwa pale, kimefanywa review na kitabu ambacho kinaitwa Paul Mboya, A Portrait of a Great Leader, ambacho kimeandikwa na Godfrey Sang na Vincent Orinda. So unaweza nyakua nakala yako ukaweza kujipatia na kuweza kujua kulikuwa vipi, jina Obama lilikuja vipi. It is a story, it is a book ambayo inaenda kwa shilingi 2500 peke yake. And you find that a different story whereby audit flags maize sales uncounted fertilizer at cereal board. So audit flags maize sales uncounted fertilizer at cereal boards. The National Cereals and Produce Board is in a spot over claims of understating maize sales and stock losses. So it is a story that is on page 14. And lastly, on page 15, hope for inmates as judiciary starts program to decongest prison. Hundreds of prisoners could soon walk to freedom following move by the judiciary to decongest prisons. So unapata hapa ni pale ambapo inasemekana kwamba katika jela nyingi humu nchini kuna watu wengi ambao wako pale na ambapo inasemekana kwamba watu wanahitajika kupunguzwa pale. So kumaanisha kwamba kuna wengi ambao watakaoweza kufunguliwa ama kuachiliwa huru ili kuhakikisha kwamba jela zimeweza kuwa na nafasi tosha za watu ambao wanapelekwa pale. Na hatimaye ni kwamba tunaangalia cartoon ya leo hapa hivi. Tukiangalia we find that two people here, this one if I'm not wrong it is Raila Odinga and William Ruto. So unapata ya kwamba wako ni wanafunzi hawa wawili, na kulingana na jinsi ambavyo wamevalia utajua tu, na ukiangalia utapata ya kwamba wa kwanza ni yako katika desk ambayo imeandikwa BBI, na wa pili yako katika desk ambayo imeandikwa Constitutional Amendment Bill. Na huyu mwenye katika Constitutional Amendment Bill anaonekana akiangalia mtihani, akibia mtihani kutoka kwa huyu mwingine ambaye desk yake imeandikwa BBI CDA, na katika mawazo yake anasema CDF Bill, Office of the Leader of Opposition Bill. Hayo ni baadhi ya mambo ambayo yamo katika gazeti siku hii ya leo. Shukrani kwa kuweza kutufuatilia, and that marks the end of our program today being on Wednesday. Until tomorrow, I want to wish you a blessed day. My name is Peter. Come out, this is the morning. This show, this is the Daesak TV, Cradle of Goodness.